course, always live from the Sinorama Studios in Columbia, South Carolina. But that's not where Jordan Hill is. He covers the University of Georgia's Bulldogs for Dawgs247.com. And yesterday, Kirby Smart was at the podium. What's up, Jordan? Did we learn anything new? Are they going to win it again?
Hey, they are certainly going to try, and that was definitely sort of the takeaway from what Kirby had to say. And, it's funny to watch him and the players navigate the, we want to win it again. Then they say, well, if you do it again, that's 3 in a row. And they go, well, we're not really that worried about that. So it's funny to watch them walk that tightrope. But I thought it all went pretty smoothly from Georgia's perspective. We were talking about this after the fact. It was funny to have a media days where we kind of all looked at each other and said, okay, there wasn't any kind of crazy storyline. Really, the biggest thing from the Georgia perspective was Smoke Bowie, who had come over from Texas A&M, is no longer with the team. Other than that, kind of a ho-hum day, which if you're Kirby Smart and company, that's what you want from a media days.
Considering what's happening in Athens, what's been happening in Athens lately, I was surprised. We were sitting here yesterday. I said, I bet Kirby filibusters the first daggum 35 minutes and just reads the depth chart.
Well, I love how he came on at the beginning of it and said that Drinkwitz kind of screwed him out of that, and that they told him he needed to. He couldn't just sit there and filibuster the whole time. I was like, that Eli.
Oh man,
he said that, and then he was like, "Oh, I'll only go 10 minutes."
Yeah,
and he went like 15. So, let's not give him too much credit on the avoiding of
filming. Yeah. So, what do you think about that situation before we dive into the actual team with the AJC? I had a pretty strong opinion about it last week, but I want to hear yours because you're on the ground down there and you obviously know the lay of the land a lot better than maybe we do from the outside.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing, and we were talking about this in that main ballroom just before I came up here, there's a lot of things that they uncovered that was factual, that was reasonable reporting and things that none of us had known about. But then when you go through and look specifically at the situation like Jamal Jarrett, I got the police report after the fact and went through it, and it does not match their reporting, the way they framed it and some of the things they included and did not include. When you have a situation like that, you undermine all the actual good reporting you did. And if you've seen with Alan Judd, the AJC reporter in question, you've got people coming back from, someone who ran for political office in the state of Georgia in the aftermath of this situation with UGA has spoken up and said he reported things about me that were untrue. And look, I wound up losing an election. Now, is that true or not? We don't know, but that is in question. And that's what happens when you put yourself in a situation like this. So, I'll be interested to see what the AJC does from here. I'm expecting there'll be a retraction based on just all the talk around that situation. But it's definitely complicated. And I think sometimes it's hard for people on the outside to really understand how exactly, as simple as it sounds, journalism works. And, to put yourself in a situation like this, like they have, again, it takes away from all the legitimate reporting you've done and calls into question your legitimacy and what you are trying to do as an outlet.
That is so sad. It's ridiculous. I mean, if you ask me, and the fact that you can report these things without retraction if they're not totally true. Anyways, we'll move on. All right. So it's the middle of July here, Jordan, and it's pretty crystal clear. I think tomorrow Georgia is going to be picked to win everything again. They should be. But if there is a concern for Kirby Smart, a major concern, if you want to call it that, what would it be at this point in time?
Well, to me, there's two spots on the team that I am most interested in once we get into the season. One is obvious, it's quarterback, because you've lost Stetson Bennett. As many naysayers and detractors within even the fan base as there were, they don't have a Stetson Bennett this year. And Stetson was proven, especially last year. I thought he took major strides with his game. You've got two really talented guys coming in fighting for that job in Carson Beck and Brock Vandegrift. I think it will be Carson Beck, but we'll see through fall camp as well. And either way, you've got a guy who's never started a college game before, and they've got a really good start to the season. Other than having to play South Carolina, I mean, they play UT Martin, they play Ball State, then you got that South Carolina game, then you got UAB. You do have a little bit of runway with these quarterbacks besides the South Carolina game. but those guys are going to have to step up. And the biggest thing that Kirby harps on is good decision making. They can't turn the ball over. They can't give away possessions. And then on the other side of the ball, to me, outside linebacker, you lost Nolan Smith, you lost Robert Beal, 2 former 5-star recruits, and you're trying to find a way to replace them. And Kirby talked in the spring and said that's the greenest outside linebacker room he's ever seen. Chaz Chambliss, who's going to be a junior this season, is the most experienced guy. And he really hasn't played a ton. I mean, he stepped up when Nolan Smith tore his pec against Florida last October and played a whole lot more. And he spoke really confidently during the spring about how far he's come. But they're really talented there. They just brought in 3 freshman outside linebackers who were really, really talented. Damon Wilson, Samuel Mpemba, Gabe Harris. But just a lot of unproven guys in that room. It's just a matter of some of those guys stepping up.
Okay, JC, I know you're about to ask a question. It might be the same one I'm asking. The quarterback room, it's deeply talented. I mean, there's a young man but you didn't even mention his name, and Gunnar Stockton, who at one point in time was committed to South Carolina, and then of course decommitted with the coaching change. Mike Bobo is now calling the plays. I'd like you to touch on that as well, and what we'll be looking at when they get into August. But I mean, this is something that's been speculated on. I'm sure you've heard it as well. We've speculated on it here with the talent that's in that quarterback room, Jordan. It's hard to believe in this day and age that there isn't a name, maybe 2, but certainly 1 that might look at deflecting if they aren't higher up the totem pole when it comes time to almost kick this thing off in late August. What do you think?
I'll be curious. I think I would probably more anticipate seeing somebody in December decide to go into the portal. I mean, because if you look at the last few years for Georgia, I mean, think about the 2021 season. JT Daniels started that season as a starter. There was a point after Georgia went at media days, he was the betting favorite for the Heisman. A lot has changed since then for JT Daniels and for Georgia. So I anticipate those guys will probably stay with it. Stay and especially too, when you look at specifically for me of these 3 quarterbacks, Brock Vandagriff, I think would make the most sense. If he doesn't win that starting job, he's been at Georgia. But you have a situation where some of these early games, as I mentioned, maybe you do get on the field, and that could be an opening for you to show that, that you can play and that you've got an opportunity. Because Kirby talked about this yesterday at media days, that the one thing you can't really get right now is that in-game action. And, you can look great out on the practice field. You can't be tackled as the quarterbacks. They got them in those black jerseys. Nobody's touching them. But say you're a Brock Vandagriff, you come in, you're the number 2. But if you get out there and you look more comfortable and you're able to make more plays, all of a sudden you could go in and wind up being the starter before this thing's over with.
JC, Phil?
I was going to ask you about the front 7 in general. And I know Georgia's outside linebackers, it's different than your normal OLB. I mean, these are these big monster pass rushers and guys like Nolan Smith. Jalen Carter's gone. I thought it was hard to replace Jordan Davis. Didn't seem to be a factor. But Jalen Carter's pretty damn good. I mean, say what you want about whatever happened with him. I was kind of mad the Bears didn't take him, by the way. So on the interior of that D-line, because you mentioned the outs, kind of the perimeter, on the interior in there, who are some guys to look at? Would it be Stackhouse and those cats? Just kind of take us through that position in general, because I think everybody just assumes they're going to reload up there, and it looks like that they probably will.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing with interior defensive line now that Jalen's gone, it's going to be more quantity over quality, in the fact of, he was just an absolute game wrecker. Nazir Stackhouse, like you mentioned, JC, I think they're expecting big things from him. Zion Logue, another guy that's played a lot. We really thought Bear Alexander was going to be the guy, and then he leaves like 2 hours before G-Day. He announces he's going in the portal. He transfers to USC. But they've got some younger guys, Jamal Jarrett, Jordan Hall, who wound up being a 5-star, really exploded in his senior year down in Jacksonville. I don't know that he'll start right away, but he is really, really talented. They're just super deep. I think they're going to be really mindful of rotating guys in. And really, at the end of last year in the 2 playoff games, they did a really good job of rotating a number of those guys in. So they're in good shape. They're not going to have a guy that is – we're not going to see anybody pick up Jaden Daniels in the SEC title game this year. There is no Jalen Carter, but they're super, super deep still. And I think we're going to see a number of guys try to make up the production that one Jalen Carter had last season.
Dominic Lovett comes in from Missouri. Ra Thomas comes in from Mississippi State.
Right.
There's another guy that was once committed to South Carolina. I thought if you looked at Georgia last year, Jordan, if there was one position you went, they're good, not great, it was probably receiver. I think that's about to change pretty quickly when you throw Bowers and everybody else in there. What can you say about the impact that these two transfer receivers are going to have on Mike Bobo's offense this year?
I think so far Dominic Lovett has been, of the two, the more talked about. He really impressed in spring. I think he's got a chance to be probably the leading wide receiver. I still think Brock Bowers will be your top pass catcher. And I think it'll probably be Dom and Ladd McConkey battling for that really number one wide receiver role. But Ra, it sounds like, has made real strides. He didn't play at G-Day. He had some off-the-field issues back in January. But talk is that he's getting caught up to speed, that he's looking more the part. He's the guy that I'm probably most interested in, especially because I think we may see him miss a game or two early. Kirby's not the kind to kind of talk about suspensions and how long guys are going to be out. But he fits that X receiver role. They need someone to step up there with A.D. Mitchell going to Texas. It's a very interesting group of receivers because you have those guys. You've got Ladd McConkey back. You've got Marcus Rosemy-Jacksain, another big man that really took real strides as a receiver. He'd kind of gotten more attention as a really strong blocking receiver out on the perimeter. And then you got Arian Smith, who has battled injuries. But if you guys saw that Peach Bowl, I'm not convinced Georgia wins that game if he does not have that 75-yard touchdown in the fourth quarter. They've got a whole lot of options, and I think we're going to see a healthy rotation of those guys, that they're going to get several different receivers involved. And like JC said, I think it's taken a step forward as far as a receiver room, that they're really, really deep, and they'll have a chance to get a lot of guys involved.
Okay, I want to ask you about the South Carolina game, obviously being on Inside the Gamecocks here, Jordan. This is This has been a nightmare for the Gamecocks the last 3 years, to put that politely. They've been outscored something like 133 to 36 or something total in the last 3 seasons. That is, you just mentioned it a moment ago, it is the CBS game as well at 3:30, the final year of the CBS game of the week for the Southeastern Conference. It is the first major test for the Dogs this season as well. How do they view this rivalry? And also, though, how do they view, that you're aware of to this point, this program under Coach Beamer as it enters the third year?
Well, I think they understand that they're a threat, and I think that you see South Carolina in that tier of teams that want to knock off Georgia. I think it's just a matter of South Carolina being able to do that. You know, we did see that with Muschamp was still the coach, them upsetting Georgia in Athens. I'm sure, especially Kirby, has not forgotten about that. You know, it's one of those things when I look at it from South Carolina's perspective, it's like you would really have rather had that game last year played in Athens and then get this game where, you know, the situation is that Georgia's breaking in a new quarterback. That would, if it was a road game, would be his first road game. But still, I do think it's going to be a big test. You know, this will be the first legitimate SEC competition that guy and the rest of the team will have faced this season. And, you know, I think that is a big test for Shane Beamer and company because, like you said, JB, these games, frankly, have not been close the last couple of years. You know, that one game when Shane went off after the fact about all the 5 stars, you know, that Georgia has. And, you know, are you kidding? You know, what are you going to do with all those guys? You know, I do think when you think about Georgia fans that they remember Shane saying that. I'm sure they kind of revel in that in the last few years. So I do think that it is sort of one of those proving grounds for this South Carolina team, especially early in the season. I think just from on the outside that South Carolina has the talent to be that number 2 team in the East. To me, the biggest concern is that offensive line. But that's a big test early on. And I'm not big on moral victories, but if you can at least keep that one close, that would tell me a whole lot about the South Carolina team.
How about the rest of the schedule, though? I mean, the thing that just Phil, I think it might have been you that mentioned this last week. It is still just strange to me to see the second to last game of the season is Georgia and Tennessee. That never happens. And for where they have that game, you just wonder what these two – I'm pretty confident we know where Georgia's going to be. But where will Tennessee be on November the 18th? Is there anything prior to that? Exclude South Carolina from this conversation, good or bad. Is there anything prior to that in doing your research to prepare for this season, for this program, that really stands out and says, well, they better be careful there?
I mean, for the most part, no. And, Georgia's been catching a lot of flack for the schedule. And, they were going to play Oklahoma at Oklahoma, which would have really beefed up the schedule. That would have been in week 2. The SEC said, look, go ahead and take that off the schedule because you'll probably be going there before long. And Georgia wound up with Ball State, which is not exactly a fair trade there. But the only games that really strike me would be Kentucky, because I do think Kentucky will be dangerous, getting Liam Cohen back as offensive coordinator, Devin Leary. But those games honestly haven't been that close the last few years either. They did kind of give Georgia a scare last November. I think that wound up being a 16-6 game. Georgia's offense just really couldn't get anything going. And then Florida, just because you just never know in Jacksonville. Things just get really, really weird. I have a lot of questions about Florida. I don't think they're going to be that good this year. I am not convinced Graham Mertz is going to be the answer at quarterback, but frankly, I don't think they have many other options. But those 2 games to me before that Tennessee game in November, and my thing with that Tennessee game, you're so late in the year. What does the health of your team look like? You're having to go to Tennessee. I think that is a very, very dangerous situation for Georgia. And you definitely want to have all hands on deck when you get to Neyland Stadium.
Isn't that amazing, guys? Florida really doesn't have a quarterback. Georgia's got 13 of them. It's amazing. They got a whole friggin' roster of quarterbacks.
We were joking about Nick Saban potentially having to channel his inner Spurrier and just, throw a different quarterback in there, even on, different drives. And it was like, and do you think, Jordan, that the level of talent and ability between Beck and Vandergrift is so close that Kirby may end up having to do the same?
I think it'll be more about, because again, I think it'll be Carson Beck, just how he handles being in the game. And I'll say this, back at G-Day, I mean, he looked comfortable and he was sharp. He played really well. Brock, I thought, looked a little more hesitant. I think he kind of felt the pressure of that moment because he did really need to try to prove and separate himself from Carson. That, to me, is the biggest thing. They both can move a little bit. I think Brock is more of an agile guy than Carson, but Carson's got a big arm. So I would anticipate we're probably going to see, even in those early games, I think that they're going to try to not get it where you look at the box score at the end of the day and be like, well, they had about the same number of completions or the same number of attempts. I mean, I think they're going to try to make it clear once the season starts, hey, this is the number 1 guy. We may use this other guy some, and you saw that last year, just not to a really big degree with Carson Beck as a number 2. He played in 7 games. But I think they're going to try to roll with 1 guy. I don't think that Kirby wants to answer questions about the quarterback each and every week if he can avoid it. So I think you'll see those, 2 guys, but I think it'll be very clear by the time we get to September who that number 1 guy is.
Kirby will have a Saban-esque blow-up if he has to do that week after week after week. He just needs to get the hands going like Nick does, and it'll all work out from there. 26 of 35 for 310 yards, 4 touchdowns, and no picks thrown last year for Carson Beck as a backup quarterback to Stetson Bennett. We'll let you run on that note, Jordan. We want to get you back here as soon as we can. It'll be here before you know it, and then you won't sleep again until, for you, covering Georgia mid-January, considering they'll be in the playoff again. So just get prepared. Where are they going this year? Where are they going to be in the playoffs?
Either the Rose Bowl or New Orleans, which I'm assuming it would be New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Who cares? Either way, you got a great trip.
It's a win-win.
Yeah,
it's a win-win, buddy.
Man, dang, man, what a really unfortunate turn of events for me. It's rough.
Hey, thank you for spending your time with us. Great stuff. Can't wait to get you back soon.
Absolutely enjoyed it. Appreciate you guys.